Oh, yeah. Find your seats. Have a nice. Is that where you want to sit? All right. Hey, guys. How's it going? Good, good. We are in our very last week of the Who We Are series. Just before we have our very first one night next week, which you're not going to want to miss. You're not going to want to miss it. And you definitely want to invite somebody. If you don't know who I am, my name is Reed, and I have a privilege of being on your student team here at Granger. And you're gonna have to bear with me tonight because it's gonna feel like we're talking about one thing, but then we're gonna go to talk about a different thing. Okay? So, in order for us to get into this topic, I'm gonna need to take you back in time. All right? Back in time to 5th grade Reed. All right? I don't know how many of you have been in 5th grade. It was a trick question. You should all raise your hand unless you're somehow still in 5th grade. Well, then you would still have to raise your hand, wouldn't you? You'd still have to raise your hand. Well, 5th grade Reed, I'm going to invite you into a dilemma that 5th grade Reed had. And let me take you to the middle of the year, 5th grade year. Yep, it's going to be great. 5th grade year, middle of the year, and there was a particular girl that I kind of liked. You might be asking yourself right now, Reed, is this a relationship series? No, it's not. It kind of is, because we're talking about our relationship with Jesus and the church, but it is not. Let's, for the sake of this conversation, call her Mackenzie, all right? Now, me and Mackenzie, we didn't know each other. I mean, I knew who she was, and she knew who I was. I mean, my best friend was her cousin, you know? Like, we knew each other. And it just happened to be right before my 45-minute band class that I was like, you know what? Now's the time to shoot my shot. We're not there yet. Why? Because the timing felt right. Again, do we know each other? Also, take into account this is 5th grade, all right? You guys know weird stuff happens in 5th grade, right? Like that's just true. It's just true. And so I went up to Mackenzie at her lunch table. It was good. And I went kind of around the subject a little bit. I was like, hey, I know that you like me and I like you. Right? I mean, that seems like a nice roundabout way, okay? And I was like, so we should date. She was like, yes. Yeah, it was amazing, right? It was amazing. No one in 5th grade even knows what that means when you ask someone to date, but we were now dating. Now, this is not the point of the story. Yeah, you can clap for that, but you are going to quickly be very against me in a second. So, I went to my 45-minute band class. I kind of started thinking about it, and I was like, man, this is nice. You know, this is nice to have a girlfriend that I just found out what her last name is, and like, this is great. This is a good time, right? And then, I don't know what got over me, probably because I was a 5th grade boy, and 5th grade boys don't think right, but I was like, you know, this isn't working out. Okay, think about it. Think about it. We barely knew each other, so that wasn't good. I've always been kind of like a big-time initiator and just get it done kind of person, and so like it seems like I probably should have thought about some things before asking her out. But at this time, I was sitting there playing my alto saxophone, and yeah, I was in band for all of one semester, and then I quit, and I never did it again. It was cool. This was my semester. I was trying to figure myself out, guys, okay? As if you can tell from the story, all right? I was figuring myself out. And it got to the end of band class, and I kind of was like, you know what? This relationship's really just run its course. It just has. You know, God puts people in your life, sometimes for long seasons, sometimes for short seasons. This was for a 45-minute season. And so I walked back over to Mackenzie. She found me at my lunch table after band. And then I kind of was just like, hey, you know what? Gave her the whole spiel. I was like, listen, it's not really you, it's me. There's just things that I'm going through. I'm just really been processing a lot about life, a lot about like just where I've been and who I've been meeting in this last 40 minutes and all kinds of stuff. Life was difficult then, all right? Things were changing really, really fast. And so it was just kind of all the things, right? Like a little bit of it was like, well, we just don't really understand each other. You don't really understand me. I don't really understand you. And so that was that. We broke up, and I've never seen her since then, and it was a weird time. Now, was her reaction good? No. Yeah, I don't think so. Probably not. Was I smart enough in the moment to recognize that she was having a poor reaction? No, I wasn't really paying attention. I was like, hey, we broke up, right? All right, cool. I'm going to move on now. I got stuff to do. Listen, 5th grade, all right? You have to keep things in perspective. 5th grade's a really strange time. I don't know about you guys, but you know, like breakups are a thing we're fascinated by, right? We are fascinated by it. Anybody fascinated by a good train wreck? Yeah, okay, yeah, don't lie. Like, yeah, it's exciting. Like when you're watching something terrible happen, you're like, wow, this is amazing. This happened. Like as long as you're not the one that the train wreck's happening to, you're kind of in on like, okay, well, like I love to give advice. I love to watch. I love all that kind of stuff, right? And the breakup is one of those things where we are mesmerized by. I mean, how many movies, TV shows, all kinds of stuff are all about like breakups, right? Or like finding the love of your life or something. But there's a lot of little breakup stories. I mean, let's be honest. I don't know if you knew, but Taylor Swift's very first single that hit the top 100, like number 1 on the top 100, do we know what it is? Do you know what the song title is? What is it? We're Never Getting Back Together. Why? Breakup song. It's amazing, right? Do you know how many other breakup songs Taylor, this could be argued, and I'm okay arguing it. Do you know how many other breakup songs Taylor Swift has made her career on? How many? Does anybody know the number? Okay, here's the number. 63. She has made 63 songs specifically about breakups, right? Because, why? Breakups are interesting. They're interesting. They gather our attention. So you might be like, okay, all right. First off, breakups, got it. Reed, what's that got to do with who we are? What's that got to do with what's happening? What's that got to do with what's going on? Well, keep this in your mind. Breakups are messy, right? Because people are messy, and whenever you're dealing with people, things just sometimes don't always go according to plan, right? Like sometimes things just don't go according to plan. I don't know if you've ever went into a conversation with your mom or your best friend or with, anybody, and you were like, all right, I've planned out this conversation in my mind. I know exactly how this is gonna go. I'm gonna go in there, I'm gonna start with this question, I'm gonna add a little bit of humor just to keep the tensions a little lower. And then I'm going to follow that up with this other question. Then I'm going to get to my main point. And then you walk into the conversation with someone, and then it just blows up in your face. It's just you were like, this is not this is not how we planned it. I don't know who we is, but this is not how we planned it. This is not how the conversation planned it. And that's because relationships, people are messy. And so when we pick up, we're going to pick up right here in John 15:19. It says, the world would love you as one of its own if you belong to it, but you are no longer a part of the world. I chose you to come out of the world, so it hates you. Right? So in a lot of ways here, Jesus is actually talking about a pretty messy breakup. He's with his disciples at this time, and he's telling them, hey, here's what's happening. Here's what's going on. And this is at the time where he knows he is one of his disciples who has betrayed him, right? Like Judas is one of his disciples, and at this time has betrayed Jesus already, has already given up Jesus to some of the people like, hey, you tell me where Jesus is, we'll go capture him, and this is what leads to Jesus' death. Jesus knows about this, and so just that alone, right? Your best friend sitting at the table with you, and you guys are having a conversation. I mean, tensions are kind of high, right? Tensions have got to be pretty high at this table. And Jesus is sitting here, and he's like, okay, I have a limited amount of time left. And so it makes sense that Jesus would use this time very purposefully, making sure that the disciples knew and remembered what was important. And that's what he says, John 15:19. So he's got very limited time left. He's got one more important thing to say to his disciples. What does he tell them? He tells them, John 15:19, the world would love you as one of its own if you belong to it, but you are no longer a part of the world. I chose you to come out of the world, so it hates you, right? So your last moment with one of your closest people, this is what they decide to say. And think of it this way. We all of us, are in a relationship with the world. Here's what I mean by that. The world tells us what to believe, right? It tells you what to believe all the time. Like, sometimes your teachers tell you what to believe. Sometimes you come to church. We tell you what to believe, but we wouldn't be considered a part of the world. Sometimes your friends tell you, hey, you should do this. You should act this way. Sometimes you have coaches or someone else influential in your life who's telling you, hey, if you acted more like this. Sometimes you watch TV shows, and they tell you how to dress. They tell you how to act. They tell you how people who are likable, what they should be doing. And so the world tells us all the time how we should act. The world also tells us, hey, here's all the things that are not like God. So shut out God for a second. Here's the things that you should be learning and doing that are different from what God teaches. So, or if you're a Christ follower, that means Jesus came and he's helping you change your perspective. When you start following Jesus, you broke up with the world. Like, if we're going to follow Jesus and Jesus tells us to be transformed, Jesus tells us to be like this, then we can't be like the world, right? But we all start off being like the world. John 15 also says hate, right? That, I don't know about you, but hate's like a pretty strong word for me. Like, I don't really like using a bunch of really strong language when I'm talking to people and or like hearing it. Like, I don't like hearing it either. Like, whoa, hey. It's different if you're like, I hate Twinkies, right? Like, okay, that's fine. I can get behind that. That's cool. I'm not as offended. But like, even just the language of people, like even friends just goofing around, be like, oh, I hate you. All right, let's calm that down, right? Like, because sometimes you hear something enough, you actually start to believe it. So like, jokes are funny until they're not jokes anymore. And so I don't think Jesus really means like, hey, they will actually hate you, but it's going to cause some tension. You're going to feel like the world is telling you, hey, you got to act this way, you got to behave this way, this is what you got to do. I was an athlete my entire life, so this is what athletes do. That's how I grew up. This is what athletes do. This is what they look like. This is what they do. These are the places they hang out. These are the kind of other people that they like to go after or whatever. Like, this is what athletes do. This is exactly what it looks like. And then, even in that context, it was like, this is what athletes do at my school. This is what we do. So if you want to fit in, this is what you have to do. And that caused some real tension in my relationship with Jesus. Because I knew, okay, following Jesus doesn't look like that, but there's a pull all the time of what that's going to be like. And at times, even I was in a sense where I was like, why is the world trying to do this to me? Why does the world want me to look like this? Why does the world want me to do this? And I don't think Jesus meant for us to be victims either when he said this. Hey, the world's going to hate you, but you're not a victim. You're not a victim. Why? Because you no longer belong to the world. You no longer belong to the world. 2 Corinthians 5, it says, if anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person, the old life is gone, the new life has begun. What's that mean? Just in short, it means we grow, right? It means we grow. When we are in relationship with Jesus, the more he teaches us, the more we talk to him, the more he talks to us back, the more he gives us his heart, his mind. That means we start to look more like Jesus. That means we start to grow differently. And so, I don't know, I'm just going to give you guys a heads up on this one, right? Like, I like to go back and be like, hey, what was life like for Reed in middle school? But I'm going to tell you what life is like moving forward, okay? For just a second. And you can take this or you can leave it, but that's okay. If you choose to follow Jesus, there will be a relationship in your life where you almost feel that tension and you have to pick. Where you'd be like, I continue to run after Jesus with everything in me. I continue to love him. I want to think like him. I want to be like him. And you want to go that direction and keep going that way. And you have a friend who has been your friend your entire life who is not running after Jesus. And you will start to grow apart. Because you'll be like, I don't understand why you like that. And your friend, this is justifiable, your friend will be like, well, I don't understand why you don't like this anymore. Because you used to. Why don't you now? And you, in your mind, will be like, oh, you might not actually say this, but I'm gonna say that you're gonna say this. You'll be like, wow, Reed was right. This is amazing. Yeah, the more I have run after Jesus, the more I have tried to be like Jesus, the more like Jesus I have become. Because anything that you set your sight on, you will become more like that. If you want to be more like Jesus, you can be more like Jesus. And so you can run in that direction. So sometimes when people are nice in breakups, they use that line, right? That's where I learned it in 5th grade, of the line of like, hey, it's not you, it's me, right? It's not you, it's me. It's not you, it's me. But here's the thing about following Jesus and how that transforms us and what that looks like. In this instance, this actually is you. When you break up the world, hey, you don't want to be like the world anymore. The world is old, is dead. The world is trying to teach you things that are like, is unhelpful, is hurtful, is temporary. And Jesus is trying to teach you those things that is what? Like, at the end of the day, like, we want to be in heaven, right? Like, Jesus wants to see us in heaven with him. And so he's like, hey, that's where I'm going to transform you. That's where I'm going to push you. That's where I'm going to move you to. So you have heard the law that says, Matthew 5, you have heard the law that says, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. This is a perfect example of like he's talking to people at this time, and their law, their own law, says, hey, don't love your enemies. Hate your enemies. They're going to hate you, so you hate them back. And Jesus' response is that, no, pray for the people who you consider your enemies. So I don't know who your op is, right? I don't know who that is. But do you pray for them regularly? No, not normally. Not normally. Because why? You're like, hey, listen, if you're against me, I'm against you, right? I grew up like this. I'll be the first one to tell you, like, I grew up like this. If you're against me, I'm against you. If you don't want to be loyal to me, I'm not going to be loyal to you back. And Jesus is like, whoa, time out. Let's flip the script on that. They might be against you, but you're not against them. Because what? 1 John says this, we love because he first loved us. So, Jesus could very easily be in the boat of, hey, you're against me. We in this room who have been in a relationship with the world obviously are against Jesus, against his teaching, against what he's trying to do, just like this passage. And he could have said what? Nah, I'm against you too. But instead, he did what? Came, died on the cross for you and me. Was like, no, I choose you. I choose you. And Jesus chose you first. Have you ever been chosen before? Like, that might sound like a weird sentence that you've never answered before, and that's okay. But have you ever been chosen before? Where somebody actually cares about you so much that they're willing to show up and like they want to be in relationship with you? And I don't mean like you're putting in all the effort. Like, I don't know if you've had all those relationships where you're like, hey, if I don't text them, we're never talking. We're like never talking. But the person that's like, hey, I will go out of my way 10 times out of 10 to be around you, to talk to you, to love you. Have you ever had a relationship like that? This is actually what Jesus is hoping for. Jesus is like, hey, I want you to recognize that I chose you first. So that's a funny thing, and that's what's sitting before you now, is that you have the option to recognize, that God chose you first, God loves you, he values you, that he wants to be around you, and you have a couple different options as to how you respond. One, you can 5th grade read this thing. Yeah. You can be like, hey, I'm going to break up with the world. I don't want to be like the world anymore. A little bit of it is that thought, right? The recognition. I don't want to be like what is being sold over there. If it's that I have to look like this, if it's that I have to think like this, I have to be this smart in order to be successful, I have to make this much money to be successful, I have to whatever the world is telling you, if that's what it's like, I don't want to do it. So you can break up with the world. That's option number 1. 2 is you can renew a commitment with Jesus. For some of us in this room, we know Jesus. For some of us in this room, we're kind of like, hey, I don't know about the whole religion thing. I don't know about the following Jesus thing. That's okay. It doesn't really matter where you're at on the spectrum. It's fine. But Romans 12 says this, don't copy the behavior and the customs of the world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. I don't know if you've had someone in your life who that's the description of how they feel about you. That what they want for you is perfect, that it's good. Like somebody wants good for you, and that genuinely you're probably just gonna like it. Like how amazing is it? Like following Jesus. Not that following Jesus is easy, because it's not. But man, it's so worth it. And so maybe you're in this room and you're like, hey, I don't know about the Jesus thing, but I don't want to be like the world. I know that for sure. And maybe some of us in this room are like, hey, I've been following Jesus for a while, and the world keeps creeping in. This is my story. The world keeps creeping into my relationship with Jesus. I don't want to be like the world. I've committed to Jesus a long time ago, but for some reason, I just care what the world thinks. And maybe you're in that boat. Here's the third thing that you can do. Pray for the people who haven't met Jesus yet. Now, let me put a big emphasis on the word yet, right? Jesus works all things, and in all things, Jesus works. So, like I said earlier, all of us have been in a relationship with the world before, and we had to break up with the world in order to follow Jesus, right? So my story, there's a big fat yet on the end of it. I was following a lot of things of this world, and yet God still was working and worked through people in order to find me, to tell me that I was chosen. And so next week, you guys have a great opportunity. You have a great opportunity. If you're wondering why we're so passionate about One Life, if you're wondering why we're so passionate about finding somebody who is far from Jesus, who needs the hope and love of Jesus Christ in their life, why we're like, hey, one night is next week. So are you inviting your One Life into this place for next Sunday? And I hope that your guys' answer is yes, I want to do that. I want to invite somebody next week to hear what Jesus is doing in someone. Because there's a yet for all of us. We are all a mess. The world is a mess. The way that the devil works in the world is a mess. I was a mess before I knew Jesus. And guess what, guys? Sometimes I'm still a mess. Your table leader is a mess. We all are imperfect. We all are trying to figure this thing out. We're all trying to follow Jesus. And that's the beauty of it, is that he continues to choose us whether we're doing perfect or not. because following Jesus is anything but perfect. So you guys have a perfect opportunity next week to invite your One Life here for one night, and you can tell them, I'm not telling you to lie, all right? But you can tell them whatever you need to tell them to meet Jesus for the first time. It could be like, hey, there's a hayride. Hey, it's going to be fun. Hey, we're going to do, there's s'mores. Hey, we're going to ride fake horses and go somewhere. I don't know. You'll find out. You'll find out. It's going to be fun. So there's plenty of different options, but here's what I don't want you to forget. Here's what I don't want you to forget real quick, and then we're going to pray. The band's going to come back up, and they're going to lead us in one more song. Here's what I don't want you to forget. The reason why you are inviting them is because of the yet. That's the reason why you're inviting them. Is, hey, I know that there are holes. I know that there are problems. I know that there is an emptiness. I know that there is something that is not right. And Jesus wants to change your story and transform you to look more like him. That's why I'm inviting you. The fun is great. The fun is great. But that's not why we follow Jesus. Following Jesus is fun, but that's not why we're doing it. So, band's going to come back up, and then we're going to pray, and then they'll finish us off. Hey, God, you are, we love you, first and foremost. God, we thank you for everything that you've done for us in our story. And God, we praise you for the yet. We praise you that although we are a mess, although we are not prepared, although we continue to fail, God, you continue to show up. You continue to choose us first. And God, you continue to invite us into what you're doing. You continue to invite us into choosing someone else. Because God, we know that we experience your love through the love of other people. And so God, next week, we pray that you give us courage over this next 7 days, not only to invite somebody into our community, but God, that you give us courage to invite people into a relationship with you, that you give us the words to say, that you give us peace, because God, I know like sometimes we're a little anxious to invite people to things. But God, I just pray that your hand's all over it. And we know that you're moving and you're working. And God, we just want to join with you in what you're doing. So God, we love you. We praise you. It's with all this in your name we pray. Amen.
Well, I'm going to invite you guys. We're going to do a little something different. I'm going to allow you to sit if you so desire. Reach just informed us and reminded us that we have a really good opportunity next week, right, to invite the one. But we want to give you a little space now as we're coming to the end of this series to maybe reflect on the teaching we had today, but maybe spend some time asking God to show you who that one is if he hasn't yet, or if you haven't asked yet. But reminding us also through this song that it's not just inviting them to this, it's showing them Christ through our lives. So I want to invite you guys to pray during this time. You can sing along still, but we want to provide a space for you to reflect and to see who is that one and what does it look like for my life to reflect Christ so I can be the one. Let me be filled with kindness and compassion for the one for whom you love and gave his son for humanity. Increase my love. Help me to love with open arms like you do. Love that erases all the lies and sees the truth. Oh, that when they look in my eyes, they would see you. Even in just a smile, they would feel the Father's love. Oh, how you love us. From the homeless to the famous and in between. help me to love with open arms like you do. A love that erases all the lines and sees the truth. Oh, that when they look in my eyes, they would see you. Even in just a smile, they would feel the Father's love. And guys, that's our prayer as we go back into our week. I'm going to give you guys a moment. You can stand up and then head on to your small groups.